So yeah, if you can put yourself back in those times, right? There were some who would fight against um slave traders, both African slave traders and European slave traders. But then there were also some kings, some queens who were fine with the slave trade, right? Um, and they had African slave traders and European slave traders. And what the African slave traders would do, they would go and they would, from across the continent now, it wasn't just everybody's at the coast. No, they would exchange. So you could have like somebody from the middle of the continent, and then they'd end up way over to the coast, right? But it was an exchange. So they would go down the river, they would walk or something, they would exchange to another slave trader until they got them to the edge of the. And then on their way down there, a lot of them would attack other I guess tribes, right? Other peoples, smaller groups. Because you had bigger groups and smaller groups. Now, when it comes down to what you're saying, advocated for us, at them times they weren't going to do that. Why? Because the people who were in charge, who were over the slave trades, right? Why would they care about you? And that's just, why would they care about you? You're they're shipping you away. They gave you away. That's why they have the point of no return, right? So they just gave you away. They're not going to think about you anymore. They're just really not. They're not going to sit up there and write a history lesson about people they gave away, because you're no longer with them. You're no longer, they're not going to, because a lot of people are like, well, how don't they know? I used to ask that question. Well, why wouldn't you know all the details? Why wouldn't you know? Because why would, then when I thought back, if someone feels like you're nothing and they've attacked your tribe, right? Just to pillage it, because some of them were just called slave raids. Like I said in the previous video, there were many reasons why they kidnapped and sold human souls. Many reasons, and one of them was just the what they call a slave raid. I have a clip of it, but I don't know if I'm gonna put it up. But it's a slave raid, right? And they would do this specifically just to bring the kidnapped, whoever they kidnapped, to the Europeans. Now, when I say they did not care, they did not care who you were, whatever. Here you go, and it was an exchange. Okay. Now, I'm gonna take that back. They did care about. They wanted a lot of the skilled people, because the Europeans. That's what the Europeans wanted. Okay. So they wanted a lot of the skilled people. Now, when they sent them off, it's not like, let's say, 30 years after the slave trade is over. Okay. They're not thinking about those are people they sent off. So when they get started education and everything, like, they're not saying, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder. Let's try to figure out how we're going to write about them. Let's see what they're do. Let's say, no, it wasn't like that. There was no TVs, no nothing. So out of sight, out of mind. Let's go 50 years after the slave trade ended. You have a whole new generation of people. They're not asking about that slave trade. They're not asking about anything. So unless an older person is talking about it, they don't care about it. They don't care about who it is. Now, there in Benin, there are some people who do care, and they can't. They there's a special on them. They were the ones who ran and lived on the water, right? Because they were trying to escape the African slave traders and the European slave traders. They went to live on the water, because you have to know where you're going, especially back then. You have to know where you're going, and that's where they escaped to, and that's why they still live on the water today. And it was because they were trying to run from the African slave traders. And there's a whole thing about, they don't want them to be married to anyone in the families of the slave traders that took their loved ones. It's a whole thing. Oh yeah, it's a whole thing. They're like, they forbid anyone to marry into any family that was in this doing that was in the slave trade business. For whole thing, yeah. But that's just in that place. I'm not sure about any other place, because they only had a special on that place on online. I mean on Netflix. But yeah, so there wasn't going to be anybody actively advocating for us that we would know about. Mm-mm. Because they were also trying to survive over there too. Because there was some people running and they were getting slaughtered too. And when I say gone, like extinct gone and absorbed into another tribe. Yes, there are some that are no longer there. They were that small, no longer there. Whole families, whole peoples wiped out. Some were sent, like you could have a smaller group. Some were sent off, and the other ones, the whoever the king or whoever would use for something else. Yep. And sometimes if the European didn't want them, they would cut their life short right there on the spot. Yep. It was brutal. Anybody who lies and says that no, we had a kind and more loving trade. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. If you go and look, especially in East Africa, where Tipu Tip, that's a slave trader, and his homie Rumaliza or something like that, they were chopping off people body parts. Word up. It was no. It was not, and that's a lie. Well, the trade and on the continent of Africa was very kind, and they got to no, it was not. No, it wasn't. I won't even lie on them people like that. No, it wasn't. So yeah, there was no reason for people who hate you to then write your history and say good things about you. Um, Now that's for the people who participated. And those people who participated in the slave trade are generally the ones who are in ruling. Okay? So they're in charge of what people do. Okay? Um of course some people were mistakenly enslaved and sent over. And they got a couple people back because they were some of the higher class and they were like, oops, we sent the wrong one. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden people got jumbled up like some I don't know, but then they did have in other places they would have they would purposely get a prince or something to go over there. Mhm. Yep, depends on who, like another big tribe would go on to a smaller tribe and they would purposely send that prince or that king over there. Purposely. They really like to get them. So, you just never know. It's crazy. It was really crazy. But in the end, they sent their most skilled. They sent so many people that the numbers, the population was dwindling in some places. But as far as teaching who did it, a lot of people not going to teach who did it because it's something they want to forget. But it's just like over here. I mean, white people don't go in their attics and get out the heirlooms made of 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 black people's skin, and they don't. You know what I'm saying? It's true. They don't want to talk about it. Both sides want to forget, but the descendants of the enslaved all around the world don't want to forget. They won't forget. See, people want to forget what they want to forget when they're the bad guy.